An ICU consultant at the Royal Gwent Hospital in Newport, Nick Mason also takes photographs in his spare time. During 2020, he photographed the COVID-19 crisis from the front line, delivering a powerful, sobering and unflinching look at the pandemic from his unique position inside it.
My background is obviously as a photographer, but also the day job is I'm an intensive care consultant. And when the pandemic hit, my initial reaction was it was such a historic event that we needed to have a visual archive of what was going on. As time went on, the more I took those photographs, the more I became aware that there were whole levels of the story that needed to be told, from the experience of patients through the unprecedented experiences of staff, and the fact that we only coped because we had people who were not used to working in intensive care, people who had no experience of that sort of work coming in and helping us out. And without them, we would never have coped. Colleagues from anaesthetics, colleagues from theatres, colleagues from throughout the hospital. And then also that there were just people in the background who nobody ever hears about, people who aren't paid a great deal, unknown, unrecognised people who provide such a contribution to the way the whole system functions. And so those were just some of the layers of the stories that I felt it was important to start documenting. We've been very lucky, I mean, and I've realised how lucky I am in that a chap called Luke Pavey's done a series on BBC Wales, which was called Critical. So we've actually had, prior to COVID, we've had television cameras on the unit, and as a result of that, people were quite receptive to taking photographs, to have their photographs taken. And even on a couple of occasions, I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you haven't taken my photograph," and so I've been quite keen to be photographed. So I was amazed at how receptive people were, and right down to when it came to, it was very obvious that one of the things that you had to represent was the fact that people die from this awful virus. And if you were only telling the stories of the patients who survived, that was really only half of the story and wasn't doing justice to the families of the bereaved. And as I went about trying to think how we could represent death and do it in as sensitive way as possible, I was amazed at how receptive people were to saying, yes, that's part of the story that you need to tell, and not being offended when I was taking photographs, for example, of deceased bodies being put into shrouds. So I found the staff were incredibly, my colleagues were incredibly receptive and helpful as to what we were doing. I've got a filter on my brain which tries to stop me saying the word unprecedented, because we've heard the word unprecedented, I think, an unprecedented number of times over the last year. But it really was an unprecedented event. We have never had anything like this in the history, in the 72 years that the National Health Service has existed. Intensive care, which bore the brunt of the virus during the first wave, has never experienced anything like it. And to begin with, that was just something that had to be documented. The challenge to the nation, biggest thing we've faced probably since the Second World War, and the biggest global pandemic probably since the 1918 flu pandemic, which you know, we often forget killed more people than died in the whole of the First World War. So it was historically unprecedented. I've been very moved when people have come up to me and said, you've told our story, and that they feel that the combination of the images and the words that I try to put with those images, they feel represents as accurately as anything they've seen and as anything that they've read what it's been like to work through the pandemic. And to be able to do that for my colleagues has been an enormous privilege. Well, I was doing a little bit of online research at looking at some of the previous recipients, and I feel incredibly privileged. and very, very honoured to receive that award and to be placed amongst some very, very talented photographers. So I feel humbled and I feel privileged. The more you look into it, the more stories there are that you realise can be told and need to be told. One of the things that's very different about the second wave compared to the first wave is the first wave was very much intensive care that took the hit. The second time around, it's now the whole of the NHS, from primary care, but also in secondary care, throughout the whole hospital. All services are being affected, which ironically has taken some of the pressure off intensive care in the second wave. And so it's become apparent to me that there's actually that larger story that needs to be told now. So you'll find me sometimes with my camera outside of ICU, trying to capture the impact on my colleagues in other specialities. I mean, I think the combination of the quality of the photographs that I've been able to take, and also the not just the access that I have to the environment, but also I don't take a single photograph without it being taken for a reason, because it tells part of the story of a patient's journey from admission to hospital to hopefully when they leave alive, or sadly when they die, or also the staff's experiences. So I think it's a very authoritative account, and I'm unaware of anybody who can combine, if you like, the authority of being a consultant in intensive care medicine. So having that insight and understanding of what's going on with the quality of photographs that I can provide. So I think a book will be, I would like to hope that I can move towards the definitive documentation of how COVID affected our National Health Service.